Iran has one enemy. They've been saying it for 45 years. Every speech, every protest, every chant in the streets. Israel. So here's what I need you to explain to me. If Israel is the enemy, why is a Saudi oil tanker on fire in the Red Sea? Why are Iraqi soldiers dying in American bases they share with no one? Why is Lebanon burning? Why is Yemen, one of the poorest countries on earth, launching missiles at cargo ships that have nothing to do with Israel? Iran's enemy is Israel, but Iran's bullets are landing everywhere else. But why? To understand what Iran is doing, you first have to understand what Iran can't do. Iran has one of the largest armies in the Middle East, over 500,000 active soldiers, ballistic missiles, drone programs that experts say rival some NATO countries. But here's the problem. Israel has the Iron Dome, the Arrow missile system. It has the United States. It has F-35 fighter jets and one of the most sophisticated intelligence agencies in the world. If Iran attacks Israel directly, Iran loses. Badly, possibly existentially. So Iran made a decision decades ago. A cold, calculated, deeply strategic decision. If you can't punch your enemy in the face, you hire someone else to do it for you. But the genius and the terror of what Iran built goes so much deeper than that. Starting in the 1980s, Iran began a project unlike anything a nation had attempted before. Not building an army, building armies in other countries that fight on Iran's behalf. In Lebanon, they created and funded Hezbollah, a militia that eventually became more powerful than Lebanon's own military. Hezbollah has over 150,000 rockets pointed at Israel right now. In Gaza, Iran funded Hamas, trained their fighters, supplied their weapons tunnels. In Iraq, after the 2003 U.S. invasion left a power vacuum, Iran moved in and built the Popular Mobilization Forces, 200,000 fighters officially part of the Iraqi state, loyal to Tehran. In Yemen, Iran backed the Houthis, a rebel group that eventually took over the capital and now sits on one of the most important shipping lanes in the world, the Red Sea. And in Syria, Iran propped up Assad, keeping a loyal government on Israel's northern border. Iran calls this the axis of resistance. Geopolitical analysts call it something else, a ring of fire, surrounding Israel on every side. But here's what most people miss. These groups don't just fight for Iran. They fight instead of Iran. Every missile Hezbollah fires at Israel is a missile Iran didn't have to fire. Every ship the Houthis attack in the Red Sea is economic pressure Iran didn't have to apply directly. Iran gets the impact without the exposure. You might be thinking, if Iran hates Israel this much, why not just go to war? Here's what that would actually look like. In April 2024, Iran launched its first ever direct attack on Israeli soil. They sent over 300 drones and missiles, the largest single missile attack since World War II. Israel shot down 99% of them before they even crossed the border. The US helped. Jordan helped. Saudi Arabia let its airspace be used to intercept them. Iran spent enormous resources on that attack and achieved almost nothing. That single night accidentally revealed something Iran had spent 45 years hiding. Its actual military reach is far more limited than its rhetoric. But the proxy strategy? That's a different story. The Houthis have disrupted 15% of global shipping through the Red Sea. Major shipping companies rerouted around Africa, adding weeks and billions in costs. All from a group of fighters in one of the world's poorest countries. Hezbollah has forced millions of Israelis in the north to evacuate their homes, not because of a direct Iranian strike, because of a group Iran trained and armed 40 years ago. Hamas's October 7th attack broke Israel's sense of invincibility. The psychological damage alone was immeasurable. Iran didn't fire a single bullet on October 7th, but Iran's fingerprints were on every weapon used. Here's the part that nobody talks about, the part that makes this strategy genuinely terrifying. Iran can't lose a proxy. Think about that for a second. If Israel destroys a Hezbollah base, Iran says, that's not our base. If the US kills Houthi commanders, Iran says, those aren't our soldiers. They have plausible deniability built into the entire system. Every time the West or Israel strikes back at a proxy, Iran watches and learns. It's a 45-year field test of what works and what doesn't, all without risking Iranian lives or Iranian soil. And there's something even more calculated happening here. Iran doesn't actually want these wars to end. Because the moment there is peace, real peace, Iran loses its influence. The militias lose their purpose. The resistance loses its reason to exist. Conflict is the product Iran is selling, and it's been selling it for 45 years. But here's where it gets genuinely dark. This strategy doesn't just hurt Iran's enemies, it destroys the countries where the proxies live. Lebanon was once called the Paris of the Middle East. Today it has one of the worst economic collapses in modern history. Hezbollah is one major reason why. Yemen was already poor. The Houthi war has created what the UN calls one of the worst humanitarian crises on the planet. Gaza is in ruins. Iran's chess game is real, but the pawns are actual human beings. But the proxy war is only part of the picture, because Iran has another weapon, one that doesn't need a militia, one that doesn't need a soldier, one that can bring the entire global economy to its knees from a single choke point. The Strait of Hormuz. This is a strip of water just 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, and through it flows roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply. Every single day. The United States, China, Japan, India, Europe, all of them depend on ships passing through this corridor. Iran sits on one side of it. Multiple times in 1988 and 2019, and repeatedly since, Iran has threatened to close it entirely, to plant mines, to block tankers, to turn the world's most important shipping lane into a naval battlefield. They have actually seized tankers, harassed vessels, attached limpet mines to ships in the Gulf of Oman, not as acts of war but as messages sent to the world. The message: pressure us, and we will make the entire planet pay for it. But that's not even the most audacious attack Iran has ever pulled off. In September 2019, drones and cruise missiles struck the Aramco oil processing facility in Saudi Arabia. Aramco is not just any oil facility. It processes roughly 7% of the entire world's oil supply in one location. It is, by some estimates, the single most valuable piece of industrial infrastructure on the planet. It burned for days. Global oil prices jumped 15% overnight, the largest single-day spike in history. 5% of global supply simply vanished for weeks. The Houthis claimed responsibility, but US and Saudi intelligence pointed directly at Iran. The precision, the flight paths, the weapons technology, all Iranian fingerprints. Plausible deniability. Again, and it doesn't stop there. In November 2017, a ballistic missile struck near King Khalid International Airport in Riyadh, the Saudi capital. It was the first time a missile had reached that close to a major city since the war began. Saudi officials called it an Iranian act of war, carried out by Houthis using an Iranian-supplied Birkin missile. And just in March 2026, Iran struck the US embassy compound in Riyadh directly with drones, following American and Israeli airstrikes on Iranian territory. Diplomatic soil, civilian infrastructure. Nothing, it seems, is off the target list. On January 17, 2022, Houthi drones, Iranian-supplied, struck 3 fuel tanker trucks at Abu Dhabi's ADNOC oil facility in Musafa and set fire to an extension of Abu Dhabi International Airport under construction. 3 civilians were killed. The UAE, one of the wealthiest, most stable cities on Earth, woke up to explosions it had never experienced before. Think about that. Not a military base. An airport, a fuel depot, civilian infrastructure that millions of ordinary people depend on every single day. So let's zoom out and look at the full picture of what Iran has built over 4 decades. Proxy militias fighting in 5 countries, a chokehold over 20% of the world's oil, the ability to strike the most protected oil infrastructure on the planet and walk away clean, drones reaching civilian airports across the Gulf, and tanker seizures that remind every shipping company on Earth who controls these waters. And as of this very week in March 2026, the escalation reached a level no one thought possible just months ago. On February 28, 2026, an Iranian drone struck Terminal 3 of Dubai International Airport, DXB, the single busiest international airport on the planet. 4 staff were injured, passengers were evacuated, flights across the entire Gulf were suspended. Then, on March 2, 2026, Iranian drones targeted the Tanura refinery, Saudi Aramco's largest, processing 550,000 barrels of oil every single day. It was forced to shut down entirely. Global oil prices surged 10% in a single day. None of this is random. None of this is chaos. This is a country that cannot beat its enemies in a fair fight, so it made sure there would never be a fair fight. But we still haven't answered the original question. Why are Saudi ships being hit? Why are UAE ports being threatened? Why are Gulf states, not Israel, taking the economic pain? The answer comes down to one word: normalization. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have been quietly moving toward peace deals with Israel. The Abraham Accords in 2020 saw Bahrain and UAE formally normalize, and there were real signs Saudi Arabia was next. To Iran, this is an existential threat, not military, ideological. If Arab countries make peace with Israel, the entire narrative Iran has built, the resistance, the axis, the decades of sacrifice, collapses. Iran becomes the lone extremist, not the noble defender. So Iran pressures the Gulf, attacks their shipping, destabilizes their security, makes the message very clear: side with Israel and see what happens to you. It's not random violence. It's a warning, delivered through the Houthis, through Iraqi militias, through the constant threat of the Persian Gulf turning into a war zone. Iran can't stop Israel from existing, but it might be able to stop Israel from being accepted. So, does Iran's strategy work? By some measures, remarkably well. Iran has never fought a major war since 1988, but its influence stretches from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. It has militias in 5 countries. It has forced the world's most powerful military, the United States, to spend trillions of dollars in a region it can never fully control. But by other measures, the cracks are showing. Iran's economy is devastated by sanctions. Young Iranians are protesting in the streets, not about Israel, but about their own government. The money going to Hezbollah and Hamas is money not going to Iranian hospitals, Iranian schools, Iranian futures. The chess player has been so focused on the board, they forgot about the pieces they're standing on. And here's the question no one in Tehran seems willing to answer. If you build your entire national identity around an enemy, what happens to you the day that enemy is no longer there? What happens to a revolution when it runs out of things to resist? That's the question. And nobody, not Iran, not Israel, not the rest of the world, knows the answer. But we'll be watching. If you're still asking but why, that means it's working. Subscribe, because every week we find something that makes absolutely no sense, and then we explain exactly why it makes perfect sense.